I am here to share about autobiography of a yogi and Kriya Yoga in the modern age, Kriya Yoga for the modern age. I'd like to start by telling you a story about, 18 years ago or so, the first time I met Swami Kriyananda. Before I met him, I had read Autobiography of a Yogi. I was, like Zach was talking about, I was in the absolutely desperate camp of life, searching for an answer, and this book came to me in a miraculous fashion, which is another story I won't tell right now. But after reading the Autobiography of a Yogi, I then, through the grace of God, stumbled upon Ananda. I found out that there was this man, Swami Kriyananda, who was a direct disciple who was still living. At that time, I was working in New York City, in the financial markets, right? So, like probably the opposite of what you would think of a yogic lifestyle, like what Zach was talking about, surrounded by a lot of money and greed, and good people too. And it just so happened that while I was working in New York City, an Ananda community started to develop on the East Coast in Rhode Island. And so I had gone up there a few times to visit this community in this rural area in Rhode Island. It was very beautiful. And then about 6 months later, Swami Kriyananda happened to be coming from the community in Assisi, and he was coming to America. But because of his health, he took a boat, the Queen Elizabeth II, this big, charter boat across the Atlantic from Europe into port, into harbor, to New York City. And I had the opportunity to meet Swami in person. And so I went with my, I came after my job, I was in my suit, and I didn't know anything about sort of the proper conduct of when you meet a spiritual teacher, pronaming, or anything like that. But I did know one thing. You needed flowers. So I got these garlands, and they were more like Hawaiian leis, because that's all I had at that flower store. So I just got some Hawaiian leis, and Swami came off this boat with just a small group of people. Some people know Brian and Lisa Powers were with him at that time, and just a small handful of people. And I saw Swami. He didn't know me from Adam, anyone. But what struck me when I first saw him, if you don't know who I'm talking about, this is Swami Kriyananda here on your left. It was like he was walking, he was flowing, he was in this rhythm of God. Jyotish and Devi talked about their book this morning, The Touch of Love. He was in this, Swami used to say that bliss is love in motion. And looking back upon that experience of seeing Swami, that's what I felt. He was just moving in this loving, kind of blissful dance. And so, the part of the story that I wanted to share, though, was my first conversation that I had with him right there outside the boat on the harbor there in New York City. There was a program happening at the Rhode Island community that weekend that Swami was leading on, I think it was around this topic, something around Kriya Yoga. And all Swami said to me was there were other people there that were greeting him, talking to him, and he just turned to me and he said 4 simple words that I'll never forget. Will you be coming? And then he smiled, and he was asking me a question. Will you be coming? Will you be coming to Yogananda Fest? Will you be coming to the temple of your own heart? Will you be coming to find that blissful dance of God within you? Yeah, I look back upon that experience with Swami Kriyananda, and I realized in a way, and I can tell you my response, it was, yes, sir. I will be coming, because I was. I was going to the retreat that he was asking me about that weekend. But I reflect back upon that moment. It was very simple. It wasn't any grand, right, spiritual truth that he was expounding. But there's a saying in India that one moment in the presence of a saint can be your raft over the ocean of delusion, right? All of the flux of Maya, the vacillation we see in the world, the fear, right, that is rampant in our world today. How do we overcome that? One of the Kriya Yoga chants gives us the answer. You won't have to fear anything anymore. Night and day, in thy joy, O my Lord. It's the only way out of the whole mess that we find ourselves in is to find that truth, that one eternal truth of God within us. So, will you be coming? Of course, we can answer that with an affirmative yes. We're here, we've come. But then, what do? How do we go about that coming? How do we go about that way of awakening that Jyotish was talking about this morning, that the eternal way, that it's not a religion. Phil Goldberg was just talking about it, right? We're spiritual, we're not religious. Oh my God. We could talk about all of our oppressive churchianity experiences, but that's not this panel, that's not this topic. It's about the way of awakening. How will we be coming? So I wanted to offer you a seed thought in terms of Kriya Yoga, because we're not going to share the technique, in just this little talk here, and you can learn the first steps in our centers that we have throughout Los Angeles. But I want to share with you a seed thought from the Bhagavad Gita. And there's a part in the Gita, those of you who don't know, right, the Gita that Phil was talking about, it's set on a battlefield. And there's one moment where Arjuna, who represents us, right, he represents the devotee, you, me, all of us, devotee, every man. Arjuna has there's a whole chapter called the Divine Vision, where he sees Krishna, right, his charioteer, his guru, in his infinite form, right, and he sees light upon light, galaxy upon galaxy, universe upon universe. It's this mind-blowing experience of infinity, of seeing God in his infinite, in his formless, infinite presence and being. And he's overwhelmed. And there's part of the vision, he sees saints and yogis, right, meditating in the Himalayas. And he says, I saw your rishis who have tamed the kundalini, meaning that divine energy that's within our spine, that it was once virulent and now tamed, raised by love on the rod of awakening. So that's the thought I wanted to share today, that Kriya Yoga in the modern age it's the way that we raise this energy. We know, science tells us now, we all know this, that everything, matter is only a manifestation of divine energy. But how do we actually realize that? That's the power of Kriya Yoga. It's giving us this superconscious sword to cut through all of this fear. You know, the coronavirus, you know why it's called that? Corona means crown. Because of spikes and it looks like a crown. But you know where the real crown is, right? Your crown chakra, the light of your soul. Swami Kriyananda wrote a song, nothing can dim the light of my soul. But how do you realize that light? How do you awaken that light? How do you come to that light? You have to raise it in your own spine, in your own being. On the rod of awakening. And what is that rod of awakening? It's our spine. It's what Jyotish was talking about this morning, that the altar is our own central nervous system. So will you be coming? Will you bring that energy of your own being and offer it back up to its source? it's such a simple science. And it only works, though, if we approach it with reverence and devotion and love. That's why that quote, actually it was when Shanti was here. Our dear friend Shanti will be speaking later as well. We had a Kriya weekend with Shanti in November, a Kriya initiation weekend. Then when I opened up the Bhagavad Gita, that's when I stumbled upon that passage, raised by love on the rod of awakening. That, you see, it can't just be we can't get there by technique alone. We can all go down a YouTube rabbit hole, right? I mean, we can just watch one video after another. We can read one book. I mean, we've got Crystal Clarity Publishers has just moved to LA. We've got a lot of books, and that's great. And I encourage you to read. But you know what Sri Teshwar said? Wisdom is assimilated not with the eyes, but with the atoms. That you must raise this energy in your own being. It's the way of communing with God. It's the science of loving God. So Kriya Yoga in the modern age it's the same. It's the same deathless teaching that's always been there. The same thing Yogananda said in this great spiritual classic, that if you burn up all the books, that the devotee, where there is a true devotee with true bhakti, with true devotion, he would discover these techniques. You will uncover them because it's all about you. I was thinking recently, Yogananda has that chant, Peter was singing it outside before, in the valley of sorrow, 1,000 years until tomorrow. I'll wait just to see you, just you. Right, talking about God. And I was thinking it's not about you. It's about you, just you. It's really that simple. We get all caught up. Well, he said that against me. She said, why doesn't he act that way? Why doesn't she act that way? If only this, if I had that job, if I got... If we can just come back to the simple center of our own being, raise it by love on the rod of awakening. And how do we do that? You know, the foundational technique, and that story I told you of Swami Kriyananda, will you be coming? What is Yogananda's, many of you know, the techniques of Kriya Yoga, is foundational technique, energization exercises. Do one with me, where you tense the body, and then you relax. He said tense with will, and then relax and feel. Let's do one more. So, he said of those techniques, if you were to go to a desert island and you could only take one technique, the technique to take would be the energization exercises. Because through them you would discover the other techniques of Kriya Yoga. The principle, he said, of energization is the greater the will, the greater the flow of energy. Right? This is what Jyotish was talking about, that it's not just intention alone is not enough. We have to start, yes, with the thought, and that's in the invocation and the prayer. That's what we want, is to raise our being up to Divine Mother. But the techniques give us, they're like the mystic key of awakening. How will you be coming? And then how will you be coming? Through your willpower. Yogananda said that willpower is desire plus energy directed towards a goal. So it's that way for us to take our energy and offer it with enthusiasm, with love, and with energy and focus and concentration. It's like we're just trying to focus on just you, just that one thing, which is God within us. And so Kriya gives us that way to tap into that divine energy, direct it inward and upward through the spine and up into the higher center at the point between the eyebrows. So it becomes this incredible communion with God. And you know this is why Phil was talking about this as well, that Yogananda came at a time, of course, when he knew what he was getting into, and he prayed, and many of you know this story, he prayed so desperately before he left India. He said, my prayers reached a zenith at noon, that if I prayed any harder, my head would explode. This is almost the way that he described it. I'm paraphrasing. And right at that time, those of you remember this story, there was a knock at the door. And he opened the door, and who was it? It was Babaji, the Supreme Master, who's very polite. He knocked. How polite Babaji is. It's very courteous, and knocks on the door, and opens the door, and rest assured, the Heavenly Father has heard your prayer, he said to Yogananda. Go, right? You have my blessing. Because Babaji and the great ones, they know the complexity of modern life. They know that we're addicted to our cell phones, that we're just running around and just making up a maelstrom of just restlessness. And they know that, that's the great enemy. In the Gita, the arch enemy that Arjuna is fighting is restlessness. It's desire, my great enemy. When you have desires, you have restlessness. Of course we all have desires. We're restless to varying degrees. It's just taking that desire and it's shifting it towards God. So the great ones know that we need help. I don't know about you. It's like, Houston, we have a problem. We do have a problem. We have a big problem. But we need help. And that divine help is coming to us in this age. The ray of redemption that Babaji and Christ and the Masters are sending is through Kriya Yoga. Because we can appreciate it. We can't, not just intellectually, right? We can appreciate it through our own divine experience. So that is what we're all here really to celebrate. That's why we're celebrating Yogananda's centennial of coming to America. That spirit of finding God within us. And this special day of his Maha Samadhi, right? What does that mean? Maha, great, Samadhi, oneness, that great exit from the body into the great body, into the great ocean of God's bliss. That's the only thing that will heal this world. Swami Kriyananda wrote a beautiful, we do it every week, and you're all welcome to come tomorrow. We're having the Festival of Light service with Jyotish and Devi at our, what I like to lovingly call, our strip mall of all religion in West LA, which we have one here in the South Bay and one in the Thousand Oaks. And we're opening a center in East LA too. But every week we practice this, we celebrate, I should say, this Festival of Light. And it's a mystical poem. It's the soul's, it's sort of like the story of the soul's long journey away from its home in God and its return. And we do an arati to the great masters, and we invite people up for a blessing at this center to remember you're not this, right? It's not you. You're heading back home to back home to God. I brought that up because every week there's this line that, it touches my heart. How many people here have lost a loved one? Of course, we all have. And how many of you have gone through an experience of grief from having lost a loved one? You don't need to raise your hands on that. We've all gone through that experience. There's a line in the Festival of Light where Swami Kriyananda says, our human griefs Your love alone can mend. Think about that for a moment. We all have gone through pain and suffering. We're going through pain and suffering. We've lost a loved one. We have a loved one who's fighting addiction. We've lost someone to addiction. We have a parent we've lost suddenly. Someone has taken their life. Whatever. We've all gone through it. But that suffering and the grief that we experience in life is a meanness of the heart. Sri Yukteswar, those of you who know Swami Sri Yukteswar and love him, he wrote that book, The Holy Science, and in there he talks about the meannesses of the heart. And one of them is grief. Our human griefs, your love alone can mend. You have to raise by love on the rod of awakening. It's taking the whole entire experience of life, like Yogananda talked about in his poem Samadhi. Today being his Maha Samadhi, we should read that poem, Samadhi. Anger, greed, good, bad, salvation, lust. I swallowed, transmuted all into a vast ocean of blood of my own one being. Smoldering joy, off-puffed by meditation, blinding my tearful eyes, burst into immortal flames of bliss. You see, it's all. Divine Mother and the Masters know all the problems that we're facing, but they're giving us the way of awakening. And Kriya Yoga is a tool, and when it's practiced with devotion and reverence and steadfastness, that it will bring us to the true promised land that we've been seeking, which is God alone. It's always been, it always has been, and always will be. There's only one home that we're going to. I'm going to do a 20-second timeout. And I've got about 10 minutes until Peter, our next speaker. But I want to just pause and see if anyone has any questions on Kriya Yoga. Yes, John.
So how do the energization exercises lead to the other techniques? How would you describe what that means?
How does energization lead to the other techniques? It's that discovery of that the matter is a manifestation of divine energy, that we start to learn through energization. We become more aware of ourselves as energy, and that awareness then leads to a control of energy. So it's part and parcel of the path of Kriya Yoga, John, because you need to start with awakening that energy, awakening the enthusiasm that you have latent within you, and then being able to control it more deeply through the other techniques of Kriya. So it's absolutely essential, and that's why we spend a lot of time with people on the energization exercises and sharing them and making sure that they not just understand them, but to practice them. Because that's at first it can feel just sort of odd. Why am I doing all these sort of wacky movements? Yogananda discovered, some of you may recall this, those exercises, his unique contribution to the science of yoga, the way he called them, by observing a cat. You know how cats and animals, when they'll sort of tense, and then they make, jump off the couch or something like that. Have you noticed your pet, your dog, or your cat at home, they kind of vibrate like that? There's actually a word, it's called pandiculation. That's what they're doing, right? They're tensing, and they're bringing, what are they doing? They're bringing the life force into their bodies, and it helps them be healthy. Animals pandiculate like 40, 50 times a day. How about it? Why are we? That's what Yogananda is trying to say. Energize. Literally call on the cosmic current, and the way that you call on it is through your willpower. There's a desire there. There's an openness. There's saying, come. Will you be coming? Yes, come. Allow the energy to flow down into you. Tense. Relax. And there's a whole method to the madness. We have 5 pranas: the star, above me here, the 5-pointed star, remember, you're the star. If you hold your hands out, Swami Kriyananda would talk about this. 1 point, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're a manifestation of these 5 different pranas, or energy. So energization is key, because it helps you to harmonize and balance the prana in your body. That prepares you for deeper meditation.